You would agree with me that Mr. Shabiq's passion for quality is exemplary. And I had the privilege of knowing him before, and I know that he speaks of quality and food safety from the heart. Just a couple of thoughts on this topic while we are talking about it. You know, we drink a bottle of water, or we drink water from a bottle every day. We don't ask whether it is safe or not. We assume it is safe. We drink from a bottle of juice, now and then. And the same, we don't ask that whether it's safe or not. We take food and safety and quality for granted, but you imagine as a food and beverage manufacturer making millions and thousands and millions of bottles day in and day out, it's not a trivial task. There are levels. You saw HACCP evolve to Emirates. We have now the Emirates quality mark. There was a term Shabiq used in real-time food safety. I think that is the future of quality. But bear with me a minute, because understand the implications of relentless quality, irrespective of what it will do to your eventual business. Translating that into the manufacturing lines and how you manufacture your product. I think, and I believe, and I know you believe and you agree with me that quality is a top priority. Quality and food safety is a top priority in food and beverage. All right, with that, I would like to invite Mr. Sky Kurtz, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Pure Harvest Smart Farms and Vens Company. And he'll talk a little bit about his organization, but he's going to talk to us about the future of food and exactly to what extent can we create that in the GCC. So let me welcome Mr. Sky to the podium. He's already
here. Hey, thank you. Hi, is this on? Great. Hello, thank you for the warm introduction, and also I know everybody stuck around to the end of the day here, so I will hopefully keep it interesting. And my name is Sky Kurtz. I'm a food tech entrepreneur, so fitting with the closing toward the closing of the Food Tech Summit. I created two businesses targeting a theme that I think is pervasive and important, and the way my purpose in being here is to sell you on the idea of food in the Middle East and also of innovation in food, and I think you've seen a lot of it in the auditoriums around here. But I happen to be part of two companies, and I'm lucky to be part of two companies that are innovating in a big way in two different areas of food production, and I'm going to talk about Pure Harvest Smart Farms because it's based right here in Abu Dhabi, and we currently have an operating facility here, and I'll cover that. But to sell you on that idea, there's a common sales tactic that's called fear of loss and hope of gain. So I'm going to start with the fear part, because hopefully that'll keep it interesting and avoid most of you fleeing to the doors to get to your cars too early. And on the fear part, let me start with this. There's a common statistic that we all know in the food business nowadays, which is by 2050, there'll be around 9.5 billion people on this planet, which requires around 70% more food from a static, if not declining, resource base in terms of water and the effects of climate change on the arability of land. So that 70% more food needs to come from really two places: greater productivity or changes in diets and consumption requirements. With a growing population, of course, that problem is quite acute. And now let's double click. When everyone talks about the 9.5 billion people rarely double click on where those problems are most acute. And now let's bring it home to the Middle East. We have a population rate that's growing at around, depending on who estimates, 3%. And has anyone ever heard of the rule of 72? It's one of these freaks of mathematics whereby 72 divided by a growth rate is the time it takes to double. So 72 over I is 2. And with a growth rate of around 3%, that's about 24 years or one generation. So this region will double its population in one generation. And this region currently imports over 80% of its fresh fruits and vegetables. And in the UAE, that number is closer to 90%. So an important piece of the calorie pyramid of feeding human beings is heavily import dependent in a growing population that will become increasingly challenging to feed. And how has this region historically fed these people? Well, it's an oil-rich region, and we've been able to export. We stabilize the US dollar, our currency to the US dollar. We export oil, bring in wealth, and use wealth to buy things that we need, including food. But in a world, if you believe in peak oil, whether demand or supply, in a world where that wealth is being challenged and these nations are being challenged to diversify away from oil revenue, they're going to need to, and they will struggle to maintain that currency peg, right? So you have two things working against you. You import all your food, and that food will get more expensive in a world that also needs that food because its demands are growing. So with the fear of loss point, getting back to where it is, there is a train wreck coming in this region with regards to food and food security. And so seeing that dynamic inspired me, that dynamic and one I'll talk about in a moment, inspired me to come here and to build a company, Pure Harvest Smart Farms. At Pure Harvest, we are using world-leading controlled environment agriculture technologies to enable us to produce locally grown, premium quality fresh produce at a much lower price than imports, and which is also an important element. We need to be able to stop air freighting food or shipping it and produce locally, but it must also be at a good value, especially in light of that dynamic I told you, where unless we're extremely successful in diversifying these economies, they're likely to get less wealthy, not more, in the intermediate future. So with that, I'll dive into the presentation. Where's the next? This piece of land is our farm in Nahel, which is in Abu Dhabi, near Al Ain here, in April 1st of this year. But it could be a piece of arid land anywhere in the world, and anywhere where you struggle to grow crops in the earth, and certainly resource efficiently. And to farm this land, as you can see, there's water spigots there. Historically, this was a date farm, and prior to that, it farmed many things. But to farm this type of land and in this climate, it's incredibly resource inefficient. To give an example, in the UAE, to produce 1 kilogram of tomatoes in traditional net house horticulture, it can use anywhere from 220 to 260 liters of water per kilogram. To look at those bottles on your table, it's hundreds of those to make 1 kilogram of food that's probably worth less than 1 bottle of water. In our solution, we use 40, so it's far more resource efficient. I mentioned the population increase is another challenge facing this region, but also this dynamic of needing to air freight foods. And what choice is the consumer left with in the UAE? It's lower quality, seasonal, sometimes unsafe. For instance, last year, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change was forced to ban some of the regional produce due to food safety and quality issues. And this is what you're left with if you want an affordable solution. Or on the other side, you have always available, somewhat seasonal, but always available air-freighted import food, but at an incredibly high cost. And this image was taken inside a Spinney's market, showing the incredible price disparity of tomatoes for import versus local. This is that same piece of land just 2 weeks ago. In about 4 months, we designed, constructed, and commissioned, and then planted, and are now harvesting on that same piece of land in a very high-tech, climate-controlled greenhouse, enabling us to produce year-round premium tomatoes, in this case, as a proof of concept, right here at home. Our solution, it's IoT-enabled agriculture. Fundamentally, we have the ability to use a central terminal to control a number of systems, and I would characterize most of these systems as traditional. Things like mechanical and evaporative cooling, screens, shutters, etc., but in a perfect orchestra to manage a climate. And our crop is actually protected by nature, not chemicals. We use integrated pest management. That's beneficial insects going after bad insects rather than using pesticides. So we have no pesticide residue. It's immeasurable. We get about 7 to 10 times the yields per meter using 1/7 of the water resource. So to scale this up and what the possibility is if this type of a solution was fully adopted, this region, or this country, uses over 70% of its fresh water in agriculture, producing less than 2% of GDP and of course less than 15% of its food needs. If you took that same water resource, right, and you did it at 7 times more efficiency, you could at least be 14% of GDP, right? But that would be assuming that the food was equal value. It's not. It's much more valuable, higher quality food, and you could potentially export. So what we're trying to talk about with regards to where adoption of technology and solutions like this and the support of them, the ecosystem of food technologies that need to support this, it could have a huge and transformational impact in this region. I mentioned lower sales prices. I encourage you to go to Zoom this weekend and see the price of our tomatoes. You will see that they're phenomenally lower than the air-freighted imports of comparable quality, and at just a modest premium to the lower quality local stuff that you've seen. And then I mentioned year-round production. In fact, our production peaks in the summer. Fundamentally, photosynthesis, right, is light and nutrients and such to the plant and water, but really light is the food, and it's a one-to-one relationship with yields. Well, we have peak light levels in the summer, and so long as we can control the climate, we can actually grow. This is an image of our climate management system, the portal that we manage this thing through, or said differently, the cockpit, right, if you liken it to an airplane. Right here, you can see, it's a bit blurry, but I'm going to step over here to point it to you. And the upper left of that little honeycomb-looking thing is the temperature, and then below that, the relative humidity. And it's about 29 degrees and 82. On the outside, the similar honeycomb is 36 and 13. These are examples of metrics we can control and how we can differentiate the climate on the outside and the inside. And we measure just about everything and control just about everything, keeping a very active and dynamic climate inside, and then using that data and information that we capture to improve the design and capital efficiency of next year's system, as well as to optimize and improve resource efficiency within growing. This is an illustration of the climate, max and min outside and the max and min inside through August. We were able to keep it a breezy Mediterranean climate inside despite it being over 49 degrees outside and 82% relative humidity. Anyone who's lived in this country for a while knows that August can be a challenging month. Well, imagine how the tomatoes feel. And we're able to keep them in a perfect climate. And once you've been able to achieve this, you can grow just about anything. So what are we doing? I mentioned that dichotomy for consumers. We are trying to sit right in the middle and give people a new choice, which is a premium locally grown product, always available, and in fact peak availability in the summer, and do so at a modest premium to the local pricing and a massive discount to the imports, and try and get people to stop putting water on jets and flying it around to serve food to people, which is fundamentally what we do with air freighting of food. This bottom thing is called a Brix meter. This is the measurement of the sugar content inside of a fruit. And as you can see, this is our quality, 10.5, which is a very, very high measure, a very good one. But world class would be anywhere from 8 to 10. And this is 9.4, which is a European Coeur de Pigeon, the most expensive tomato available at Waitrose. We package it with sustainable packaging, something that we are big on at Pure Harvest, and we hope to drive as part of not only our ethos, but industry standard, is a focus on sustainability, on resource efficiency. This is recycled craft paper. It's much more expensive than using paper or plastic, but we believe that we should migrate away from using that plastic. We also believe that consumers are migrating away from the use of plastic. I say that as we stare at all these plastic bottles. There's not always an alternative yet. What do? We grow, market, and sell produce. So we are actually, a lot of people ask me, and many will probably after the stage, do you sell your technology? The answer is no, we don't. We actually believe that the tech is one element of it, but a huge portion of it is building a brand and trust with the consumer, implementing safe and very high standard, quality standard food production, and fundamentally, being able to manage this orchestra takes an incredible amount of training. Our agronomist is a 30 years seasoned Dutch grower who moved out to the desert of Alain to try and change the food industry with us. What I would say also on directly to consumers, we sell both via people like Farmbox, which you can find us on now, which is a direct-to-consumer portal, also in retailers and also in HoReCa channels. So we're pretty much agnostic. We want to serve the entire market. And again, I think this is representative of what's possible for many others as this industry matures. The one thing I was going to point out here that's a commonality, we have a very diverse team, an Emirati partner, a Saudi partner as we're expanding into Saudi Arabia. We also have a Dutch grower who I pointed out in the middle. But one thing that a lot of us have in common is the tree that you see up there. Almost all of us went to Stanford University. And we found each other, a group of people in Silicon Valley, seeing the potential for technology to come and disrupt a traditional industry in this region. So it's not a requirement to go to Stanford to join Pure Harvest at all, but it just seems to be a commonality in the leadership team because I think we have a common set of values and belief in food technologies as the future of food security in this region. Beyond that, we have a number of experts who used to work with Carrefour, Hinkle, a brand builder, et cetera. But I think the moral of the story on pointing out the team is it takes a lot of people to get this done from a diverse set of backgrounds, and many of them horticultural experts. Again, a lot of people ask, hey, if you could just build a machine that grows food in the desert, why can't every farm have one? And why can't, and we engage with the government on this often. Well, it takes a lot of skill, a lot of capability, a lot of capital, and not every single farm has all of these things available. However, over time, as we adopt this technology and train and develop the capabilities of the region, I think that this region can produce a tremendous amount of its own food, and particularly in perishable goods. Because of the story of what we're tackling on true and tangible food security, water conservation, economic diversification, and sustainability, all with one hammer, which is controlled environment ag. Because that story is so relevant to so many groups, we've had an incredible amount of interest in what we're doing, yet we're a less than 2 years old seed stage startup with one proof of concept facility. So I do have to apologize. We are not on every shelf in the country. We couldn't possibly serve Carrefour alone. However, in this small proof of concept, we're doing over 380 metric tons of production a year. So we're demonstrating what's possible. And that's in an area that's only 6,700 square meters. Sorry, there we are. What did we do to get here? There was a long journey in research. I want to mention one of my partners used to work for, he worked for IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. And he was tasked with studying the challenge of focusing on the water problem in this country. And if you want to target the water problem, where roughly 70+% is used in ag, you've got to solve the ag problem. And that's where the waste in agriculture and the resource inefficiency was what led us to this opportunity, and that was years ago. And then after years of research, development, engagement with world-leading technologists, where Holland is kind of the world leader. Holland, amazingly, and not many people know this, is the second largest food exporter in the world after America, with a land mass of less than one state of America. And the way they do that is incredible resource efficiency, incredible output per unit of input. And that's what's possible here. In fact, one of the things that we challenge at Pure Harvest, where it's quite counterintuitive, and people would say this is a contrarian thesis, if you're from the investment world, is that we believe that if you look at the factor endowments of food production, right? Sorry to take you all back to Econ 101. Food production, right, involves sun, land, or in our case, space, because we don't grow in the earth, we grow in a substrate. Labor, you need trade policy and economics or tax affect everything that's in production. You need capital, and you need water. And everything else is sort of details, with the exception of, in our production, we also need carbon. We actually consume CO2. So not only do we displace that airplane that otherwise would have flown food here, we actually can eat CO2 from our neighbors who are producing it, and this is the hydrocarbon capital of the world. When you go down that factor endowment list, and you look at food production, once you control for climate using technology, we're one of the best places in the world to grow food. We have an abundance of natural light. Land, 95% of the country is unarable and unusable, and we create an alternative use of that land that is valuable. Water, if we stop wasting it, there's plenty. Labor, very cheap and fluid. Capital, lots of it, and in fact, the sovereign wealth funds are searching for places to deploy that money to make an impact and transition their economies. And when you keep going down the list, energy, we're one of the best and most efficient energy producers in the world, and this technology can integrate with solar very, very well. Our peak consumption of energy is in the summer, right when peak production of solar is, which is unstorable. Our peak production is also at the peak of production, which is in the middle of the day with the highest radiation levels. So we integrate well into a circular economy. And that's where this industry can not only help the country meet its economic diversification goals, but help meet the Paris Climate Accords and its commitments towards sustainability and carbon reduction. All while making money, admittedly. It's profitable. We are now currently in this pilot phase where we raised a lot of money, admittedly the largest seed financing ever in the Middle East, where we literally had a mound of dirt and a promise to build. We've now gotten that done, and we're very grateful for the investors that backed and believed in this first project. We're now in the phase of expansion. We're looking at other crops. Soon we will grow strawberries, capsicum. Now that we've demonstrated that climate corridor, the opportunity is wide open to expand. And we will soon be formally launching another capital raise, a very large one, to help our expansion both in the UAE and into the Saudi market. We also, I would say our goal is to be, certainly by 2021, in at least 3 countries, and ideally with a broad portfolio set. Right now we grow 17 varieties of tomatoes in our proof of concept, but again, just demonstrating what's possible and sort of showing off that the technology can make incredible quality food at a reasonable cost. This is some more pictures of the farm. I wanted to leave you with some images, again, to keep you from running for the door and for your car keys. That's the greenhouse in the upper left. That's the beautiful hand of my grower, Jan Prins, on the right, but really demonstrating what are very sweet, snackable tomatoes, historically not really grown in this region. Something I left out when I spoke earlier that's about what's possible. A lot of the food that's important to this region is chosen like tires. It's chosen for durability and its ability to survive use and a very difficult journey, as opposed to flavor profile, nutrition density, etc. We are trying to change that, and we're introducing varieties that have never been seen before, and we intend to do that in every category we enter, because we can take any genetic material from anywhere in the world, source seeds in South America, all over the Mediterranean, transfer them here, and introduce new flavor profiles at an affordable price. And then that's a bumblebee to illustrate to you that our integrated pest management, our hardest workers are our bumblebees who are used to pollinate. And of course, that's a cherry on the vine tomato, also not commonly grown in this region. So with that, I think I'm going to close on, I said the hope of gain. I talked about fear of loss, hope of gain. On the hope of gain, I believe that Pure Harvest Smart Farms is representative of a revolution that is happening around the world with the adoption of controlled environment ag technologies that are helping regions that have historically struggled with food production have an alternative. And to take some of that capital that they may export to serve their people's needs, and instead invest it in their own country and their own food production capability to help avert that train wreck that we talked about of the doubling of the population. And it isn't just this region that needs it, there's other parts of the world. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you try our tomatoes at some point this week. Questions, or do you want? Does anyone have questions? If not, I'm happy to speak or wait aside. And gentleman in the back.
Thank you for that, Sky. The system you have, are they grown in soil bags or is it a hydroponic system? And secondly, how much faster does this grow compared to conventional methods?
Very good question. So I think you all were able to hear the question, so I'll just address it. It is hydroponic, though admittedly hydroponics is one method of more resource efficient growing. Aeroponics are also effective, and those are a lot of the vertical farms are using aeroponic methods where they essentially spray water as opposed to sit it in a bath of mineral water. So that's the first one. The second was on how much faster we grow. It very much depends by crop. However, we are able to do 2 things that are quite unique. One, we're able to, because our system can close, we can dose CO2 and increase the parts per million of CO2 in the air. That makes more food available to the plant, right? Fundamentally, plants, as part of photosynthesis, take sunlight and CO2 and make CO2 into their sugars. That's their source of food. We increase that source of food while they have plenty of light, and in do so are able to stretch the barriers of what yield is possible. In doing so, we can increase, just with CO2 alone, yields per meter over 30%, right? And then on the other thing that we're able to do is we interplant. We're able to take, simultaneously grow a young and a mature crop. And this is how we have 52-week production. We harvest 3 to 4 times a week, every day or every week of the year, summer and winter. And the way we do this is right as the crop is about to mature, we then plant just beside it. If I go back and show you, I'd have to show you later. There's a space between every substrate, and in that space we can plant a young crop exactly 12 to 16 weeks before the maturation of the prior vine so that it produces. And this is where we're talking about food manufacturing. This is actually a food factory, right? It's really a farm, but it's managed just like the processes of a factory to optimize production and maximize yield per meter, maximize capacity utilization. We do not want sleeping capital, right? Just like Uber wanted to take sleeping cars and convert them into an alternative revenue stream, and they created an entire and disruptive new business model and shared economy, we hope to do the same inside of greenhouses, where all of that technology that is sleeping, that you invested all that capital equipment, we optimize its use. In fact, we're already running a pilot using artificial lighting, which counterintuitively, nobody would think artificial lighting makes sense here. We have lots of sunlight. Believe it or not, for about 5.5 months of the year, we don't have enough light for a tomato. So if we supplement that with artificial lighting, we can really stretch the yields potential and capture all that area under the curve where there isn't enough food for the plant, maximizing the output per meter, minimizing the cost per meter, which translates to a virtuous cycle of scale-driven microeconomics, feeding people cheaper and bringing prices down on the shelf. So it's a big answer to a smaller question, but I wanted to cover all of the points. Wherever.
Hi, Mrs. Sky. Thanks for the presentation. It was really informative. I just want to know if there is any genetic modification that will be involved in this process?
No, there could be though. I'm somebody we do not use GMO seed stock. Or it's a complex question though. Genetic modification, I believe, gets a very bad rap. Let me give an example. Almost all crops that are consumed in the world are grafted. That's a form of genetic modification, just not with a man in a petri dish. It's where you take maybe the rootstock of an eggplant and put inside a tomato or strawberry seed, and it leverages the infrastructure of the other plant to grow. That's how most things are grown. That is a form of genetic modification. So this anti-GMO movement, in my view personally, is misinformed. I believe genetic modification will be one of the many things that help us solve that food challenge of 2070. And with CRISPR gene editing, and the innovations and advances in science around gene editing, it is getting better and better. So I would encourage everybody who whatever television program or news, half-informed newsreel or article that totally bastardized the concept of genetic modification, I would encourage you to go revisit that long-held assumption that it's all evil. Because I don't believe it is, and I also believe that it's one of the key elements that will help us to feed all those people in 2070. A far greater evil will be a bunch of starving people because we weren't willing to pursue a science that could have helped them.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, great to meet you.
Sure. Well, can you believe it that we are at the end of the 2 days? I personally can't. All I can say from Sky's presentation, it feels like this is the hyperloop of food safety and food security for our region. So that's phenomenal. Thank you, Sky. Can we take 2 to 3 minutes to try to wrap up what we have heard over the last 2 days? I really would like to do that with you, if you permit me. Yeah? May I? All right. So in the official close to the Food Tech Summit 2018, on the first day of the summit, yesterday, we had the pleasure to hear from industry leaders on a variety of topics: digitization, robotics, connected factories, automation, and we got to meet leaders like Tetra Pak, Siemens, Ecolab, Pladis Group, Coke, Obican, ABB, SIG. Can you imagine the list? It's amazing. And how that all that is going to impact F&B in our region. Today, we witness front runners in artificial intelligence, blockchain, frontrunners like IBM and Consensus and how they are impacting food and beverages in our region. We heard from Mintel and Nielsen about the transformation in health and nutrition, and we had senior individuals from IFF, NFPC, and Actia about food security, food quality, food safety in food and beverages. I might be still missing a few speakers and discussions from the 2 days, but ladies and gentlemen, this is the future of F&B manufacturing. I can wholeheartedly say that, and I do hope that you will feel the same, is that this has been an engaging and a future-focused food tech summit in every single way. Let me take another minute, and I would like all of us to thank you to everyone who has been involved in not only the organization, but making this food tech a success. Let's give them, everybody, a big hand. And I leave you with a couple of thoughts. We are the leaders in F&B. We have challenges, but at the same time, great opportunities in front of us. Automation in F&B is not a vision. It is a reality. The question is not one of if, but one of how and how soon. So the future is in focus. The focus is on all of us in this room and what we do from today. With this, I have the pleasure to formally close the Food Tech Summit 2018. Thank you again. Goodbye for now, and we very much look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.